Ben and Me, Chapter 8. That Kite. After the disastrous lightning rod experiment, Ben was quite subdued for some days and never even mentioned electricity. I hoped that he was cured of this dangerous hobby, but alas, my hope was soon to be rudely shattered. This question of the nature of lightning so preyed upon his mind that he was finally driven to an act of deceit that caused the first and only rift in our long friendship. I feel sure that brooding on this subject must have seriously affected his mind, for this is the only way in which I can excuse his treacherous conduct. It came about in this fashion. One of Ben's favorite forms of relaxation was kite flying. On his largest kite, he had built for me a tiny platform. Made of splinters of wood, this was securely lashed to the kite just where the sticks of the frame crossed. A stout railing surrounded it, and the floor was cushioned with milkweed down, so that a safer or more snug retreat could scarce be imagined. Sailing aloft in this was a delightful sensation. The gentle motions of the kite, the warmth of the sun, and the broad view spread out below all combined to make it a thoroughly restful and enjoyable experience. A new thrill was added when we contrived a tiny car slung to a pulley running on the kite string. In this, I could cast off from my little porch and go coasting in a long, glorious swoop to Ben and the earth far below. To this car, we later added a small sail, so that when the wind was sufficiently strong, I could sail up the string to the kite. Enabled thus to ascend and descend at will, I spent many happy hours at this thrilling sport. That deceit could raise its ugly head in such idyllic surroundings and bring to an end these innocent diversions seemed particularly painful. I shall pass over as rapidly as possible the unfortunate happenings which almost brought our friendship to a close. Ben had hinted that if I were willing to stay aloft during the thunderstorm, I could, being so close to the clouds, very easily determine the nature of lightning. My reply to this proposal was prompt, decided, and in the negative, very strongly in the negative. So much so that Ben dropped the subject and had, I thought, given up the idea completely. But alas for my trust in human honor. Little did I dream of the horrid plot that this electrical mania was causing to form in his disordered brain. One hot July afternoon, I had ridden aloft and, lulled by the gentle motion and the sun's warmth, had indulged in a long nap. From this, I was awakened by a violent tossing of the kite. I at once realized, from the black and threatening clouds, that a sudden thunderstorm was rapidly approaching, its preliminary gusts already tossing the kite wildly about. Hastily preparing to descend in my little car, I was horrified to discover it was not there. Jerks on the string to signal Ben bringing no response, the ugly details of his plot began to dawn on me. I recalled his haste to launch the kite and his incessant talk while doing so, all designed to hide the fact that he had removed the car. With or without my consent, he had resolved to keep me aloft during the storm. I sought wildly for some method of descending the string. But the wind by now was so strong that all my efforts were required to cling to the frail platform. The next half hour was the most awful experience of my life. The wild plunging of the kite, the driving sheets of rain, the incessant lightning flashes, and the crashing thunder all were so terrifying that I could only hang on and pray. As shock after stiffening shock ran through my body, there was no further doubt in my mind as to the nature of lightning. It was electrical, decidedly so. Blue sparks crackled from my whiskers, every hair stood on end, and my frame was convulsed by the never-ending shocks. After what seemed hours of this torture, the storm passed, and I knew by the motions of the string that the kite was being lowered. Nearing Earth, I saw that Ben had taken cover in a shed and was regarding my approach with great eagerness. Before I had reached the ground, he was calling, "Was it, Amos? Was it electricity? Was it?" Even had rage not rendered me speechless, I should never have given him the satisfaction of an answer. As the kite touched earth, I descended and stalked past him in stony silence, despite his questions and pleading. I pursued my angry way back to town, never pausing until I had reached the shelter of the vestry. There, after my wandering family had dried me and dressed my burns, I fell into the exhausted sleep that lasted 2 days. I woke from this long slumber, thoroughly recovered in body if not in mind, to hear the familiar booming of Ben's voice. I found him seated in the very vestry where my mother, flustered by this visit of the family's generous patron, was making a great to-do over him. My greeting was cold, but Ben was most agreeable and apologetic. He had brought with him our agreement, which he felt I had broken by leaving him. "A mere scrap of paper," I snorted, and went on to point out that his electrical craze had not existed when our agreement was signed, and that it alone had caused all our differences and had made life a burden for me. In fact, I pointed out things for almost an hour. "Never," I declared, "never while this madness lasts will I return to our former association." Ben finally gave in and agreed to stop all electrical experimenting forever. He wrote it into the agreement. We signed it and shook hands on the bargain. With goodwill restored, my beaming parents brought in a few refreshments, and we had a jolly visit. The children were presented to Ben, who was most gracious to them all, patting their heads and asking questions about their schooling and pastimes. Luckily, none of them mentioned kite flying. "Amos," he said at length, "the reason that I gave up my scientific investigation so readily is this. As you doubtless know, relations between these American colonies and our mother country, England, have become very badly strained, so much so that I have been chosen to go to England and lay our case before the King and Parliament, to attempt to make clear to them the justice of our grievances, to avoid the dangers of rebellion and possibly war. Without you, Amos, I should be lost. Your advice and your wonderful facility for gathering information are more than ever necessary to me. Here is a great opportunity to prove your devotion to your country and to the sacred cause of liberty. What say you, Amos? I sail at dawn." It was a solemn moment, but without an instant's hesitation, I sprang to my feet. "Liberty forever!" I shouted. "I'm with you, Ben. Besides, I understand that the English cheeses are of excellent quality." In the cold, gray damp of the early morning, I was at the dock where our ship lay in readiness to sail. Suddenly, I noted a long line of ship rats filing ashore, laden with their belongings. Here is an unlucky sign, I thought, and hastened to ask the reason for their desertion. One of the rats, an old gray bearded fellow, pointed glumly to the tops of the masts. "Them," he said. Peering aloft, I made out, fastened to the top of each mast, one of those hated iron rods. "Lightning rods," I muttered. "That's what he calls them," growled the old graybeard. "Down here all day yesterday he was putting them up. Convinced the captain they'd protect the ship from lightning. I don't hold with no newfangled notions. I don't. I'm through." At that moment, Ben came puffing down the dock laden with bags, late as usual. "Ben," I demanded, pointing to the mast tops, "what are those?" "Why, those, Amos, why, those are just, never mind. Just hurry aboard like a good fellow. I'll explain those later." "Explain them to the sharks," I said, turning on my heel. But Amos, he protested as the sailors hurried him up the gangplank. Our agreement! Our agreement, I shouted back, says no experiments. Goodbye, Ben, and good luck. Liberty forever, but no lightning rods. So I returned to the vestry, and Ben sailed alone. And we'll read chapter 9 next time. Till then, I hope you're enjoying Ben and me. Thanks so much for listening. Love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now. Bye-bye.